The no cash bail movement in big blue city and state America, driven by decarceration, deprosecution or non-prosecution, mayors, governors, and of course Soros-funded prosecutors. He had this to say. Now remember, DeSantis is somebody who removed a prosecutor, because the governor of Florida has the power to do so, who said he wouldn't enforce certain laws that were duly passed by the legislature there and signed by Ron DeSantis. So, okay, well, you're not going to enforce the law, then you're not going to be a prosecutor.
Bye-bye.
More from DeSantis on the topic.
We also reject some of the terrible legislative reforms that have been enacted in various states across this country. Some have released violent people from prison prematurely. Others have done things like New York abolish cash bail. So you'll have a police officer risk their lives to apprehend somebody, bring them in, the judge releases them, and then 2 weeks later, that person's committed another offense, and the cop's got to risk his life again to apprehend the same person that should have never been on the street to begin with. You have seen that experiment in abolishing cash bail fail throughout this country, and in Florida, we're not tolerating it and not going to allow it to happen.
And of course, an analog to what he just said there about domestic crime is the border. What are we doing at the border? Encountering the same people that were deported, to the extent that people actually get deported anymore. I know that's not the posture of the left to deport people, but it's the same whack-a-mole situation at the border as it is in these big cities around America, isn't it? Well, maybe the scourge of fentanyl is a way to backdoor a renewal of at least some predators being removed from the streets for extended periods of time and being subject to bail. In fact, since DeSantis mentioned it, in New York, the Suffolk County District Attorney, that would be Long Island, his name is Ray Tierney, he's calling on the governor there to make more drug offenses eligible for bail as a way to keep fentanyl dealers behind bars. Under New York's no cash bail law, only Class A felony drug offenses are eligible for bail. And Tierney told the New York Post, our criminal justice laws don't focus enough on crime victims and the safety of community. Yeah, we know that all too well in Chicago, and our no cash bail law is even worse. By the way, that decision on the constitutionality of the Safety Act in Illinois is expected this month, so we'll be watching for that. Tierney, the Suffolk County District Attorney, also is requesting that Albany pass a death-by-dealer law to put fentanyl peddlers in prison for longer periods of time.
Good.
Yeah. Is there
Somebody's doing something.
Well, right, and is there an analog? Is this a backdoor way to get at least some sort of enhanced border security, as well as domestic security in big cities that have lost their minds with these no cash bail laws, this turnstile justice in their court systems? For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Tom Homan, former acting director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Tom, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So what about that? Is Ray Tierney, the Suffolk County DA, is he onto something there? Maybe the political climate doesn't allow for us to overturn, in New York, for example, the law that was passed in 2019, but maybe we can make some amendments that focus on fentanyl dealers and their cartel suppliers specifically as a way to improve the situation both at the border and in New York City and Chicago and elsewhere.
Well, absolutely. Look, fentanyl is a major killer of a young American between 18, number one killer between the age of 18 and 45. 106,000 overdose last year, most of those fentanyl overdose. And I've said it many, many times, what's going on the southwest border, it's beyond an immigration issue now. So I don't care what anybody's opinion is on illegal immigration. But when you cause a crisis this big, when you open the border up and cause a crisis this big, we got, over 5 million encounters on the southwest border in 2 years. It overwhelms the Border Patrol. When you overwhelm the Border Patrol, most sectors on the southwest border, 70 to 80% of the agents are pulled off the line to process these large groups. And when they do that, it creates gaps in the system. So, there's hundreds of miles of border unguarded when they're dealing with these large groups. And that's when the fentanyl comes across. That's when, that's when the sex trafficking women and children. That's when the 1.2 million gotaways coming across people that don't want to kill themselves in. So, fentanyl should be a priority for every jurisdiction, state, county, and the federal. And in the border, the DEA is already on record saying 95% of fentanyl comes across the southwest border. So an open border is bigger than immigration now. It's about record number of Americans dying.
Last week, former Attorney General Bill Barr penned an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal where he called on the federal government to treat the Mexican drug cartels more like ISIS and less like the mafia, and then specifically called. He didn't get into too many specifics, but essentially called for a military response and a drug interdiction response inside Mexico that needs to, whatever we're doing now, needs to be significantly enhanced, according to Barr. What's your reaction to that?
100% in agreement with him. The Mexican cartels in Mexico have killed far more people than any terrorist group in the world. And like I said, in the last 2 years, we're closing in on, 200,000 overdose? So, yeah, it's just, they should be treated as a terrorist organization. That way they bring all forms of response to them, military, law enforcement, intelligence. Now, do I think our military should go down there and get involved? What I think we should do is force Mexico. Mexico's not going to take action. We know that. They failed to take action for decades. Much of the Mexican government, military, and law enforcement are corrupt. I'm not saying everybody is, but it's a lot of corruption in Mexico. So Mexico needs to let the United States intelligence agencies and our special operations let us attack the cartels. We know how to chase the money. We know how to find the money. Because if we take the money, you shut down the organization. Let us prosecute them in the United States, not Mexico. We've done it before with cartel bosses. Let the U.S. take the lead on this, and we can certainly put a huge dent in our operations.
Since you have these relationships as former acting ICE director, what is your description of the situation from the Border Patrol's perspective, from the law enforcement perspective? What is the situation right now? What can they handle? What can they do, even with an administration that is essentially adverse to the security to securing the border?
Look, let me just say this: the morale of Border Patrol is non-existent. I've been down there more than a dozen times in the last year and a half. I started my career as a Border Patrol agent. I talked to hundreds of these men and women. The morale is non-existent. They took an oath to enforce the immigration law. They took an oath to be a federal law enforcement officer, and most of them are processing people coming across the border who are making a fraudulent claim to asylum, and then they are driven to a bus station or airline or airport, and they're flown to the city of their choice at taxpayer expense. They feel more like tourist agents, law enforcement officers. And I say fraudulent asylum claims, but people need to understand, the left keeps saying these people have a right to claim asylum. They're asylum seekers. Okay, technically they're right. However, if you look at immigration court data over the last decade, 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at the southwest border never get relief from U.S. courts, so they don't qualify. They're simply taking advantage of a loophole that says if you come and say those magic words, that you're going to be released in the United States. And if you ever show up in court, the threshold to prove asylum it's much higher than the original interview on the border. 90% fail. That's not my number. 90% is an actual number. Matter of fact, Syracuse University just did a study. They tracked all these family units the last 5 years, and they found 93% lost their case and were order removed. So the Border Patrol knows what's going on. They know most of the people are taking advantage of loopholes in the system and preventing them from doing the jobs. For it, like I said a few minutes ago, these Border Patrols are sitting in these facilities processing people who have no real right to claim for asylum. Meanwhile, there's fentanyl coming across the border. There's convicted criminals coming across the border. They've arrested people in 170 different countries, and these countries are sponsors of terrorism. If you think not a single one of the 1.2 million gotaways, these are recorded gotaways caught on camera, drone traffic, and sensor traffic. It's not a guess. So if you got 1.2 million gotaways, you got to assume that some of them came to this country to do us harm. So Border Patrol agents just feel, they feel helpless. They're sitting there processing somebody that shouldn't be processed, shouldn't have a claim, shouldn't be here. But because of the surge, they got to do it. And meanwhile, they got real national security concerns coming across the border, and they can't do anything about it.
Well, what should President Biden do?
Enforce the law. I mean, the law is clear. Like on the President Trump, people can hate him or like him, but on President Trump, we got rid of catch and release. And the reason he did that because the U.S. immigration law that was passed by Congress says this: if you enter the country illegally and claim asylum, if you're an arriving alien, you are required to be detained until you see a judge and makes a determination. And that's a strong message to the world that if you got a valid claim, come and make your claim. You're going to be sitting in a residential center about 30 days until a judge hears your case, and if you win your case, you're released to the United States. If you're not, you're being sent back. If he would just do that, or if he would put in place a Remain in Mexico program, said you can claim asylum, but you're going to wait in Mexico until your hearing. The reason they did that under the Trump administration is because, like I just told you, 9 out of 10 would fail their hearing. There's what they call a Homeland Security Life Cycle Report that's put out by the Department every year. Here's what the Homeland Security Life Cycle Report says. Even though 9 out of 10 will lose their case and get ordered removed, how many actually leave? Well, for instance, if you're a family group, you only leave 6% of the time. Some groups leave 3% of the time. So the Trump administration understood that. Said, wait a minute, if most of our falls in the claims and they never leave, why do we keep releasing them? Then next you know they're in the wind. Then we find them 10 years later. Now they have two U.S. citizen kids, and they've been ordered removed by a federal judge. So, puts us in a bad spot. Say, okay, the judge ordered removed. We have to remove him. Now he has 2 U.S. citizen kids. He may own a home. It's just that the Remain in Mexico program is a game changer. It helps secure the border. It put the border places back on the line to patrol for dangers, and it just made sense.
So in addition to, those simple policies, simple things that could be done to have an immediate effect that you just mentioned, and catch and release, reinstitute, Remain in Mexico, something else that a president and a Congress that were interested in border security could do, would that also include resourcing Border Patrol? Do we have enough Border Patrol agents? Do we have the necessary personnel and tools at the border now for enforcement?
Look, I think they have enough resources on the Trump administration because this isn't really a resource issue. This is a policy issue. Okay. So when President Trump, he had illegal immigration down 83% at a 45-year low with the same resources they have now. So it's really a policy issue. But let me say this. Law enforcement can always use more resources. So the big lie out there right now is that most of the fentanyl comes through ports of entry. That is a stone cold lie. The fact is, most of the fentanyl is seized at a port of entry because every vehicle stopped, every driver's talked to, and depending on his answers or depending on the CBP targeting system, which is a database which has a lot of intelligence from different sources, they put that license plate number in the system. That system's going to tell them this might be one you want a secondary. On top of that, they're interviewing the driver based on his responses. They'll make the decision: should I secondary the individual? But every vehicle stopped. So, of course, more fentanyl can be found in the port of entries. But when you got 70-80% of agents off the line between the ports of entry, that's where the fentanyl is coming across. That's why there's so many overdose deaths, because agents were off the line. So, of course, more resources could use by the Border Patrol, more technology, and of course, more agents, because, the more agents they have, the more fentanyl they'll get. But overall, the overall summary on this is, they had the same resource on Trump administration and decreased illegal immigration to 45-year low. So it's just really, really a policy issue.
He is Tom Homan, former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, visiting fellow now at the Heritage Foundation. Tom, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
My name is Jason Hansen. I'm a former CIA officer and New York Times bestselling author. You can protect your hard-earned retirement assets with a tax-free loophole that allows you to convert your retirement into physical gold and silver. Advantage Gold is the nation's highest-rated gold company. They have the best process, pricing, and service. If you want to get your free gold and silver investment kit, please contact Advantage Gold